Welcome to the Functional Health Coaching Show, where we are here to support and answer your questions so that you can help people on a deeper level get real results and grow your health coaching business. Do you have questions you want to ask live on the show? You can call in every Friday at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 1-347-637-1378. Are you looking to increase your credibility and grow your health coaching business using functional lab testing and data-driven protocols so that you can confidently solve health issues? Well, we have the course for you. Go to fdn.today/show to learn more and sign up today. Okay, let's join today's episode.
Well, welcome everybody to the Fantastic Friday Call, also known as the Functional Health Coaching Show. It is Friday, October the 2nd, 2020, and I am going to be your guest host this week. I'm filling in for Brandon Mole, who is taking a much-deserved break. I'm Brandy Bosco. I have been working with FDN for a few years now, and I am joined by my amazing co-host, clinical advisor, and FDN extraordinaire, Ryan Monahan. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for the awesome introduction. How are you doing today?
Awesome. I'm doing good. I'm excited. I see a few people hopping on. And for those of you who want to hop on and ask Ryan and I a question, you can do that by calling 347-637-1378 and then press 1 on your keypad to raise your hand, and we will bring you on. So while we're waiting for everybody to hop on, I'm going to jump into announcements, and I'd like to start off by congratulating some amazing new graduates this week. We have 4 graduates, all within the U.S., and they are Sally Aponte from Astoria, New York, Dr. Ann Berkeley from Arlington, Virginia, Sarah Katie from Pewaukee, Wisconsin, and Monica Boyle from Las Vegas, Nevada. Good job, everyone. I had the pleasure of talking to a couple of these ladies already in their postgraduate interviews. So it's really exciting to see so many people graduating every week and going out there and doing amazing work. And you guys get also the opportunity to join the AFDNP membership, where Ryan is our clinical advising moderator in the group. So he's there to help answer questions. Ryan, how's the group been lately?
It's been good. It's been super active, loving all of the great in-depth questions that we're getting on a day-to-day basis. And it's a really good opportunity to, be a part of a crew of FDNs that are, it's not a group of hobbyists. These are the real deal in that group. So everyone's super dedicated to their practice and their craft. And even, I'm learning a ton every day just from, poking my head in the group and reading through conversations. So it's the place to be if you're an FDN graduate, that's for sure. The opportunities for ongoing learning between, business education and ongoing clinical education, it's pretty much endless.
I agree. I definitely recommend in those postgraduate calls that everybody at least try it out for the first 3 months. You'll get amazing support in the group. We have a lot of great content. Ryan and Jennifer are always in the group answering questions. They have this little show that they call Quick and Nerdy, which is always so much fun, and a lot of people love attending those. So definitely take advantage of them. I guess I want to jump into the biggest announcement. As Brandon always says, we've been talking about this all year, but the Functional Health Coaching Conference is coming up October 23rd to the 25th. We are going to be all virtual this year, but don't let that fool you. It's not going to be just like a regular summit where you're just watching Zoom calls. We have a lot of interaction planned. We're going to have networking rooms. We have a DJ that's going to be available to keep everybody's energy up. For those of you that buy an all-access pass, you're going to get a physical swag bag sent to your house. And just a little hint, we're sending you some blue blockers. So for those people who don't want to be staring at their screens all day, you're going to get a little gift in the mail just in time for the conference. And we have an amazing list of speakers. So I really do encourage you to, consider purchasing a ticket to the virtual conference. I know every year I come out and I'm just so overwhelmed, but also motivated by all of the different talks that you hear at the conference. And one of the things that I don't think we've talked enough about is the workshop. So we usually have a special workshop on Sunday afternoon that is optional for people to attend. And this year, the workshop is the Business Accelerator Workshop with FDN Jen Maleka. So Jen is amazing at what she does. She's been doing FDN for several years, and she's offering her workshop this year. And in that workshop, you're going to learn how to figure out who your target market is, who your target audience is, so you know how to speak to them when you are talking to them either in public or on social media. She's going to have you interactively go through exercises to figure out what your packages are and how to price them. It's going to be a really, really amazing workshop. So I do encourage you, if you're interested in that is an optional add-on, and definitely think about it. I've really been encouraging, especially our trainees, to think about it, because that's just going to give you a leg up when you graduate to have all of those business or beginning business pieces in place, and you can get out there and start working with clients. Ryan, do you want to give any feedback on your experiences with the conference and why people should really think about attending?
Yeah, sure. I always say that the FDN conference the past 2 years has been the highlight of my year. And not just for the opportunity to connect with other FDNs, but also with all of the amazing education that you're going to walk away from it with. I always seem to walk away with some clinical pearls. Like last year, Dr. Karazian did a keynote speech, and of course, Kiran Krishnan from Microbiome Labs was in attendance last year, and he's going to be doing a lecture this year as well. And then there's tons of opportunities for networking and business education. And I would say that first and foremost, I always walk away feeling really like inspired and invigorated and like ready to implement all these new ideas. So it's definitely a really good way to get the creative juices flowing and to get inspired and pumped up and to be surrounded by a bunch of like-minded FDN nerds, right? That think like we do. And that in itself is empowering. Most of us do practice remotely from home. And so we kind of live throughout the year in these little bubbles, and we only interact with each other over Facebook or maybe occasionally over Zoom. But this is, a true opportunity to really, get to connect a little deeper with some of your other fellow FDNs. So if you're on the fence, don't be. It's a no-brainer. It's even just a small investment to make in your practice, and it's going to help sharpen your skills and really help move you into the right direction.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I'm so excited for this year. I know I've been able to be a part of it behind the scenes as staff, but even doing that, it's just you get to connect with people and see people. And even though we're doing this virtually, we're going to have networking rooms open so that you guys can go on Zoom calls with fellow FDNs and chat and connect and network. So it's a really great opportunity. The other announcement that I just wanted to add in here before we jump into questions, and I see a few of you hopping on the call, so that's awesome, is we had our quarterly State of the Union last week. So we have a quarterly Zoom call where Reed and the team come on and we kind of update you on what's been going on in the past couple months. And we also provide updates on what we're planning for the future. So if you did miss that, you can log into FDNconnect.com and scroll down to the bottom and look for the tab on the left that says State of the Union Recordings, and you can catch that recording there. But announcements. I'll just remind you guys again, if you do have a question for Ryan and I and you'd like to ask it live, you can dial in to 347-637-1378. Hit 1 on your keypad. I'll see that you've raised your hand and we will bring you on. And I don't see anybody has questions right now, so I think what we'll do is we'll jump into some of the questions that have been written in. So let's start with this one. This is a good one and a question that we get quite often. It says, I am wondering as to why FDN is so strict in not using Betaine HCL with H. pylori. I understand the severity of it if someone has an ulcer, but I don't understand the concept with just having the bacteria, since the bacteria thrives in an alkaline environment and messes with digestion, lowering HCl. So Ryan, do you want to jump in and kind of give your take on the whole no HCl with H. pylori scenario?
Sure thing. Yes, so to my understanding, taking hydrochloric acid supplements when you have H. pylori present is kind of like equivalent to throwing fuel on the fire, that it can actually exacerbate the infection and make it worse. So what we know about H. pylori is that it lives in the parietal cells. Those are the cells that line your stomach, right? So it actually lives in the stomach lining. And yes, it does survive in the stomach by converting your stomach acid into urease. So it can actually raise the pH of your stomach, which makes it less acidic and more alkaline, as the question indicated there. It's smart, right? It has evolved over, who knows, hundreds of thousands of years to be able to survive in this acidic stomach environment and to be able to adapt in that environment. And so, the tricky thing is, it would seem that, okay, if H. pylori is making the stomach more base, right, less acidic, wouldn't hydrochloric acid supplementation, wouldn't that lower the pH, make your stomach more acidic, and kill off the H. pylori? And to my understanding, the H. pylori infection, it kind of shies away. It's afraid of the stomach acid, for lack of a better term or expression. And so when you're taking hydrochloric acid supplements, the H. pylori can just kind of really dig itself even further into those mucosal barrier cells that line the stomach, those parietal cells, to kind of hide away in that environment. And it may just trigger even more inflammation, and it may thrive even more when it's kind of burrowing into those cells and proliferating in that environment. So that may be one kind of theory or mechanism as why, basically that stomach acid you're introducing into the stomach is causing the H. pylori to try to hide out into the stomach lining where it's going to protect itself, right? So that may be why it's adding fuel to the fire and could even cause the H. pylori to proliferate or increase and to become worse. That's my kind of thoughts on it. So in practice, I always do avoid hydrochloric acid supplements with any client that is showing up to have an H. pylori infection on a GI map, and had a lot of success with that, right? So I don't really mess around with using HCl until I've seen a solid sign that it's gone on a retest. How about you, Brandy? Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of similar to the concept when we talk about working on Candida. You see many people out there who do that anti-Candida diet and absolutely no sugar or anything that feeds the Candida, but that can actually have a counter effect where the Candida will dig even deeper, like you mentioned, into the gut lining, making it harder for us to actually address them with the botanicals. So it doesn't mean that, we can't still support digestion if you're not using Betaine HCL. While you're working on the H. pylori, there's still a lot of things that you can do to support digestion. You can use things like bitters, digestive enzymes that don't have HCL in it. I even have some of my clients do things like a little bit of apple cider vinegar and water before a meal, or things like that, just to kind of stoke the digestive juices on their own. And then once we know the H. pylori is gone, then while we're, supporting the body to allow it to do its own healing, that's when we can look to adding in the HCL again, so that you can really ramp up, the amount of stomach acid so that it can have do its own great job of digestion.
Yeah, exactly. And, the same mechanism, too, can be said for SIBO. You often hear with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, this expression that you have to feed them to kill them, meaning that if you're trying to address the SIBO with a low FODMAP diet, which is something you see people often do, they try to reduce the amount of fermentable carbohydrates in their diet. But if you go too low FODMAP, the same thing can happen. The bacteria can they can hide out in biofilms, they can hide out in the mucosal layer of the gastrointestinal tract. And then if you're taking herbal antimicrobials, they're not as effective, right? Because the bugs are hiding out. So you see that expression quite a bit within the SIBO community, that, you got to feed them to kill them. So you can kind of say the same thing in the case of H. pylori. You want it to be out and about, right? So that when you're using mastic gum or when you're using something like Matula tea, that product's going to be more effective.
Absolutely. I agree. Great answer.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Well, just checking the switchboard. I don't see anybody else having their hand raised, so we'll keep going on questions. But guys, if you are on the call and you want to ask us a question, you can just dial 1 on your keypad, and I'll see that you've raised your hand, and we will bring you on. And for those of you who haven't called in, the number is 347-637-1378. All right, let's move on to a blood sugar question. I like these questions. So the question is, I was hoping for some clarity. The fact that blood sugar may drop at night, causing cortisol to rise to raise my blood sugar, has been stated several times in the course. It brings the question of, why is blood sugar dropping at night for certain people? So I'm going to do a short answer, and I'm sure Ryan can add some things to that. But most often what I've seen with clients who have issues with blood sugar dropping at night, it has to do with the types of meals that they're eating throughout the day. So if they already are having issues with blood sugar regulation, and they have a meal, let's say they have a really heavy carbohydrate meal at the end of the day, and their body just does not do a good job of handling that glucose, insulin's going to kick in. It's going to shuttle the glucose out and drop the blood sugar. And sometimes that drop can happen pretty drastically. And then the body thinks that it's under attack, and then cortisol kicks in and brings the blood sugar back up, so it can kind of stay in this state of homeostasis. So for the most part, that's what I see when I see blood sugar dropping at night, is that throughout the day, the person that you're working with may not be having an easy time balancing their blood sugar on their own, or they're eating meals that it's just not working for them. And so that's where things like having a good snack before bed of fat and protein, just to keep you satiated throughout the night and to keep that blood sugar stable, could be a good idea for clients who tend to wake up in the middle of the night and you think that it's a blood sugar issue. Ryan, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think that was a great answer. You really hit the nail on the head there with the macronutrient ratios. If you're getting a meal that's balanced in fats and protein in the evening, that's going to set you up to help stabilize your blood sugar. So healthy fats are probably the most important thing for keeping is a buffer. It maintains healthy blood sugar levels and keeps you from crashing, right? So one analogy that I like, a good simple visual or analogy, and I've often heard this about the macronutrients, that if you imagine a fireplace, that fats are like the logs in the fire. They burn for hours, and it's a very slow burn, and it's very sustainable, right? Whereas carbohydrates are like kindling. You throw it on there to get the fire going, and it gives you a quick little spark, but it burns out really quickly, right? So, think about fast as kind of your long burning fuel, right? That's going to help keep your blood sugar stable. So one thing that can happen if your blood sugar is imbalanced, if your macronutrient ratios are off or they aren't appropriate for your metabolic type, you may see a situation where your blood sugar crashes in the middle of the night, and then in response, your liver tries to liberate blood sugar, right? Because it still needs energy throughout the night for healing and repair and detoxification, right? So your body still needs a steady supply of glucose. And so subsequently, after that crash, your body tries to compensate by raising cortisol to help raise blood sugar in turn, right? Because cortisol and blood sugar rise and fall together. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid, right? So think glucocorticoid, glucose. And cortisol rises, and that's why you might see someone like a client that has an issue where they're waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning. That's usually a sign of blood sugar dysregulation. Their body's trying to raise blood sugar in the middle of the night, but as a consequence, cortisol becomes elevated too. And cortisol is a fight or flight hormone, right? So cortisol is basically telling you to wake up and be on alert, right? Those are things to kind of keep an eye on, keep watch for as a sign of blood sugar dysregulation. But you may have to do some kind of tweaks to get that blood sugar stable in the evening, whether it's macronutrients or even looking at this is something that's talked a lot about in the FDN course, that if there's blood sugar issues in the middle of the night, that could be a sign of parasites, right? That relative elevation in evening cortisol, because we know that parasites become more active at night. So even something like a gut bug can disrupt blood sugar dysregulation and blood sugar function.
I love it. That's a great answer. Yeah, I mean, this is something, surprisingly, you're going to see this a lot in your clients, and it's a really key part in the DRESS protocol, is really working on blood sugar and sleep. And those two things, if you aren't able to get those under control, you're going to find that your client's going to struggle in other areas. So it's a really important area to understand and work on and coach your client on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, it looks like we have a caller who has a question. So I'm going to call out your area code and unmute you. So area code 808, what is your name and what's your question?
Kirsten, what he was speaking to, intermittent fasting is so popular now. And isn't that going to be, if someone's eating, say, not after 4 p.m. to get those 15 to 18 hours, isn't the blood sugar up and down going to be part of it? And is there benefit for doing that over time to get that, kind of flexibility of insulin, in the body?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, Brandy, did you want to start? Do you have some thoughts on that?
I'd love you to jump in. I know you have a lot of experience and knowledge in intermittent fasting, so I think you are the expert in this area for sure.
Cool, yeah. And of course, you and I just did the 5-day prolonged fast a few weeks back, which was pretty fun and a valuable little experiment we all got to do. It was challenging. What was it, 800 calories for 5 days, which essentially, kind of mimics the effects of fasting. I think that, like, the answer with many things that you'll find across the health community, it depends, right? If someone has metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance and their blood sugar is really, really screwed up, they need to do some more work before they jump into intermittent fasting, right? So that person may need to just kind of work on minimizing refined sugars and carbohydrates in their diet, getting their blood sugar stable with balancing that out with protein and fat. They may need to consider supplementation to help improve their insulin sensitivity with things like myo-inositol, chromium, alpha-lipoic acid. Even magnesium is probably one of the most important nutrients. Of course, it's a mineral, and it's responsible for activating over something like 500 or 800 different enzymatic reactions in the body. So magnesium, is something that can easily be checked on, like an HTMA. Looking at a hair tissue mineral analysis is a good way to look at long-term magnesium status. So if a client of mine had a history of insulin resistance, that may be something I would want to look at first, is kind of working on some of the fundamentals before jumping into something like intermittent fasting, which in my opinion, I think requires a little bit of resilience and building a little bit of a foundation first before your body can be ready for something like that. But to your question, yes, I would say that for someone that's in relatively good health, that intermittent fasting over time, even though you may have some kind of roller coaster blood sugar stuff going on initially, because during that, say, 15 to 18 hour window of fasting, your cortisol and your blood sugar is gonna crash, right? And I know a few years back when I started doing intermittent fasting, the first week or so was pretty tough. I definitely was, kind of getting hangry. Definitely kind of had the shakes a little bit. Nothing too intense, like nothing I couldn't push through. But after a week or so, that was gone completely, right? After my body kind of adapted and became more insulin sensitive, and got used to eating 2 meals a day instead of 3 meals. Now I'm at the point where I can easily go till 12 o'clock or 1 p.m. without a meal and not even feel any kind of discomfort. But initially there may be a period where your blood sugar crashes, and then your body may try to compensate by raising blood sugar, raising cortisol in turn. So it may just be a matter of kind of adapting to that, becoming more fat adapted, right, to burning fat, and for your body to learn essentially how to pull some of those reserve forms of energy, right? So when you're fasting, your body's probably going to pull some ketones from the system to use that as an energy source of backup. But again, kind of going back to that original point, I would say that someone who's got like really high hemoglobin A1C, their insulin is out of control. There's a lot of debate around this, right? Like some people will say someone who's severely insulin resistant, like they are a prime candidate for intermittent fasting, right? But I just think that in my experience, that tends to be a pretty hardcore approach to throw someone into when they may have other issues going on, other hidden stressors in the body. You may want to work on some of that a little bit first. And again, just kind of like dialing in the diet a little bit, working on hormone health, working on gut function, liver function, some of those basics.
Thank you. That was great.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Ryan. I mean, you'll find clients who are going to come to you that are, they're really worn out and their body's just not in a state where they're ready to be able to handle the intermittent fasting. And so again, that's where we do what we do as FDNs. We coach them up. We make sure that they're eating a really good, nutrient-dense, blood sugar balancing diet first. And, we're supporting them. They're doing all the things. They're getting rest. They're working on all of their stress. And then if they do want to try the intermittent fasting, there probably is going to be a period where it may be uncomfortable and they may wake up. I know, like Ryan mentioned, we did the Prolon fast, and I think several of us experienced the first couple of days where our sleep wasn't great. But once we adapted and our body was then able to pull from, switching from carb burning to fat burning, and we were able to adapt to a different type of fuel, our sleep improved. So there is definitely going to be an adaptation period, but you also want to make sure that your clients are fueling themselves well during the day with a good balance of nutrients first before they think about doing the intermittent fasting, which can have some amazing benefits and side effects in the long term.
Yep, for sure. And I definitely did experience that as well. There were a few nights where I barely got a wink of sleep, or I was waking up several times in the middle of the night. But by the end of it, I was doing just fine. But there was definitely some shifts and adaptations going on there. Another thing you could even do if someone was interested in doing intermittent fasting, from a practical and sensible perspective, I've often done this, is, to start with 10 or 12 hours first, right? Like you don't have to jump right to a 16 or 18 hour fast. Some people just kind of need to dip their toes in the shallow end first, and then you can gradually maybe increase that fasting window. So that's another thing to consider too, to potentially ease someone into that and still get some of the benefits. It doesn't always have to be all or nothing. Doesn't always have to, we don't always have to resort to extremes. Sure.
Good. Did that help, Kirsten?
It does. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
Great. Do you have any other questions for us? You don't, no pressure. I can mute you, but if you have any other questions, there's nobody else on the line.
It's ironically, I have a really sick patient right now, and we're waiting to see if it's going to be SIBO or H. pylori or ulcers or, I guess, while we're in this waiting game, like the SIBO test is coming back, her endoscopy and colonoscopy is scheduled for October 20th. That's as fast as we can get it. What are things that she can be eating that will help her really intense nausea?
No, so nausea is one of her primary challenges.
Yeah, and so much weight loss. Like she's down to like 90 something pounds from a 125 in 3 months.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot. Yeah. So, the weight loss can definitely be a sign of malabsorption of nutrients, right? That's usually a giveaway for leaky gut, right? Or even damage to the intestinal lining, like villus atrophy. There's, those villi can become damaged, for example, if there's gluten sensitivity, and there's gluten exposure damaging the intestinal lining, that could lead towards malabsorption of nutrients. It could also be worth checking to see if there's a thyroid issue with weight loss, right? So hyperthyroidism, it may not be as common as hypothyroidism, but that could be a factor that could contribute to weight loss, and could be something that's worth just ruling out, running some blood chemistry, even having your doctor run a basic thyroid panel. And then in terms of intelligent allopathy for the nausea, of course, ultimately we want to find out what's causing it, right? For certain, it could be H. pylori, could be parasites, could be SIBO. Sometimes you'll see all of those, so a combination of those. But what I've found has worked really well is ginger, in all of its different forms, whether it be ginger tea or fresh juiced ginger, ginger capsules. You can take dried ginger capsules. Ginger can really help with nausea, as can peppermint oil. If you add some, like 1 or 2 drops of food grade peppermint oil to like a tea, coffee, smoothie, that can really help. Those are usually for nausea, while I'm looking for the deeper root causes, whatever they may be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. All right. Let's see if we've got anybody else. We don't have anybody else with a hand raised. So just if you guys do want to ask us a question, you're on the line, you can press 1 on your keypad and that will raise your hand. Or if you'd like to call in, you can call in to 347-637-1378. So if we don't have any hands raised, let's go to another question. Here's a good one. So I need help understanding the rationale on why we provide licorice root in the morning, given the fact that this client case has high cortisol in the morning. I understand why it's given in the why it isn't given in the evening. She's a bit low for nighttime cortisol, but not in the AM. Wouldn't the licorice root raise it even more than what she already has in the morning? This is an interesting question.
Yeah, it's hard to say without seeing the actual cortisol rhythm or the cortisol reading.
Right.
But if there was high cortisol in the morning, you would not want to take licorice root extract. That would not be a good idea. Right. You'd only want to take licorice root if it was low, because the mechanism of licorice root is that it extends the half-life of cortisol, so it helps kind of stay in your system longer. And if it was high, that would just kind of exacerbate any potential symptoms of high cortisol, which might, that could include anything from high blood sugar to anxiety, right? It could be common with high cortisol. So yeah, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and that's my thought also. I mean, perhaps maybe if you're looking at the cortisol rhythm and it goes down quite a bit in the afternoon and they're experiencing some fatigue in the afternoon, that might be a good time to think about it. I definitely wouldn't use licorice root at night because then you're impeding with their sleep. Like Ryan mentioned, the purpose of it is to help with people who have low cortisol because it extends the half-life. And so I definitely wouldn't use it in this case if it is already high in the morning. Again, that's where you would do your investigation and find out why is it high in the morning but really low for the rest of the day.
I wonder if there may have been some confusion, like on a Dutch test, for example, you could see a situation where there is very low total cortisol, then maybe the free cortisol is high, right? So there may be some confusion there in thinking that if the total cortisol is low, that licorice root extract would be a good idea. But it's really the free cortisol that we want to base that usage of licorice root on, because the free cortisol is the bioavailable form that our cells actually use and take up. If the total cortisol is low, that's just an indication that the adrenal glands aren't producing a lot of cortisol, right? So that represents the production, not necessarily the usage. So that may sound a little confusing without seeing that kind of visual. I can kind of imagine in my head, having looked at a lot of Dutch tests, but that's just kind of speculating that maybe that's where the confusion was, that because you can often see a contradiction or discrepancy between the free and the total cortisol on the Dutch test. That's actually probably more common than it is to see them be around the same value.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, basically what you're looking at is the licorice root. You would use that if your client is experiencing fatigue and you can really definitely see the pattern of low cortisol throughout the day. Definitely don't want to give it to them at night because you don't want to interfere with that melatonin and interfere with their sleep. So hopefully that 100%. Answers the question.
Yep.
So here's a question that we get a lot. And so the question is, when we talk about how do we talk to our clients about when they should collect their sample for hormones? It's talked about in the course that it should be around day 19 to 20 of the cycle, but I'm suspecting this is based on a normal cycle. If a client does not have a normal cycle, shorter or longer, how do we determine when to collect? So this is a really common question, and my client population is all women, and I have several of them that have cycles that are not just regular 28 to 30 days. So what you're looking for is we're trying to catch the second peak of estrogen and the peak of progesterone, which generally happens about 5 days post-ovulation. So if you have a client that doesn't have a typical cycle, what I often will do is I will educate my clients on some of the signs that they can look for to know that they've ovulated. The best one, if you can have them do it, is temperature. So looking for that temperature spike that stays elevated, then you know that ovulation has happened. Or another good one, if they are monitoring that, is cervical fluid. So that does change also. And so we're trying to catch it in that spike post-ovulation so we can get a good reading on both the progesterone and the estrogen. Ryan, do you have any other things that you kind of recommend to your clients who don't have regular cycles?
Yeah, that's basically exactly how I frame it too, as well, to my female clients running a hormone panel. And I'll often recommend that they purchase an ovulation predictor kit at a pharmacy so that they can see when they have that surge of luteinizing hormone around ovulation. And then what you want to do is count forward about, like you said, about 5 days from the time of ovulation, and that would be the time to start the collection. I may also add to that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's a really common question, and sometimes it can feel confusing because each client's cycles are different. So just trying to support them and provide that education on what they're looking for.
A video on everything we just explained on the Dutch test website. If you look up irregular cycles and Dutch on Google, it'll probably come up on the top of the search results. There's like a 5 or 10 minute video on exactly what we just explained, probably in a slightly more detail even for anyone who wanted to check that out and even bookmark it. Sometimes I will just send that video too to my clients so that they can have an idea of when to most optimally run the test. Now, another quick thing to add to that is that in an ideal world, that's what we always want our clients to shoot for, to run during that window of about 18 to 22 days in their cycle. But if for any reason they kind of mess that up and it's a little bit outside of that window, it's not the end of the world. You just have to interpret the results accordingly, knowing if they ran it, during ovulation, maybe even like a little too early, or if they ran it a few days after that window of 18 to 22 days, the results are definitely still valid. You just have to know where that female was in her cycle.
Yes, all great points. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Let's check the switchboard and see. I don't see any other hand raised. We have about 18 minutes left in the show, so if there's anybody on here who does want to ask us a question, don't be shy. We're pretty nice. You can hit one on your keypad and we'll bring you on. But we do have some more questions. We're actually going through these questions pretty quickly, which is good. And a couple of themes. So let's go back to a blood sugar question. This is going to be a pretty quick one. But the question is, I have a blood glucose monitor. What ranges should I be looking for? I'm going to be testing myself before meals, so fasting, and before bed. Thanks. So when I talk to my clients about it, ideally you're looking for anything between 70 to 90, I would say, for fasting. That's kind of the ideal range. Anything above that starts giving you some clues that there's some issue with blood sugar. Ryan, do you look at a different range with your clients?
I'm actually I don't have them memorized, so I'm actually looking them up right now on my computer. I know I have a little chart I've saved for what I like to see as the optimal ranges. What I have here is about like less than 86 for fasting, and then for post meal, so about 2 hours after a meal, you want to see it below 120. So let's see what else I can find.
Yeah, and that's about as close where I do it as well. Yeah. Okay, you want to try to get the blood sugar back closer to baseline post-meal. So you definitely don't want to be testing it like an hour because your blood sugar is still going to be elevated. But it's a good way for you to test to see how you're doing with the food that you're eating. Is your body able to get back to baseline post-meal? And if not, then that's a clue that, your micronutrient ratio in that meal maybe isn't working for you, or maybe there is some issues potentially with some blood sugar balance. The
continuous blood glucose monitoring, too, is becoming more popular. I know Dr. Rhonda Patrick is a big proponent of it. It's a little bit more expensive than just a glucometer you would get for $20 or $30 at a pharmacy. But you can basically look at your blood sugar continuously all throughout the day, which would be kind of a fun experiment to see, after a certain meal, even comparing, right? Like there'd probably be a big difference between eating a potato versus an avocado, and the impact you might see on how instantly and quickly and how sharply that might raise your blood sugar. So for those hardcore biohackers out there, that could always be an option too for monitoring blood sugar throughout the day.
For sure. Those always look pretty cool. So that's something for you guys
definitely
to think about if you want to do biohacking.
Yep.
All right. Let's see if we have any hand raised. We do not. That's okay. We've got other questions we can jump to here. So this is a good question. I have a sensitivity to cow's milk and beef. Would it be wise for me to consider using Livitrate or Adrenotrate, knowing that they're coming from grass-fed cows? So I believe both of those products are glandulars. And I would say if you have a sensitivity to both beef and cow's milk, I probably wouldn't use them in the short term while you're doing the elimination part of the protocol, just because you don't know how sensitive you are, and that could trigger, further sensitivity. For the adrenal, there are like other adrenal glandulars on the market. I think some of them are porcine, so they come from pigs. But Ryan, what is your take on glandulars coming from animals that you have known sensitivities to?
Yeah, I wouldn't have much more to add to that. I would totally agree that if you've got a sensitivity to beef and to cow's milk, I would assume that there would be similar immune reactions to the proteins in those bovine-derived glandulars. I would not want to roll the dice with that. And like you said, there are other ways you might accomplish the same goal if you're using porcine-derived glandulars instead. So I would at least wait it out for 90 days. Like you said, do that elimination protocol for the foods that you are sensitive to. And then you can always, at that point, don't forget that food sensitivities are not necessarily lifelong. They can even change through your lifetime, right? So it's food allergies that tend to be more permanent. But if you're showing to have like an IgG or an IgA food sensitivity, or a food showing up on the MRT, you do want to try to systematically reintroduce one food at a time after those 90 days and kind of test the waters and see if you notice any reactions within a 3-day window.
Great answer.
Cool.
All right. Well, we've got about 12 minutes left in the show. I see a few of you on the switchboard here. Don't be shy if you have a question. Raise your hand. We do have other questions we can go to, but if there's any of you that are listening and are not called in and want to ask us a question, I'll give you the number one more time. It's 347-637-1378, and then you can just dial 1 on your keypad to raise your hand, and I'll see you, and we will bring you on. Oh, and look at that. It looks like we have a question. Are we ready for one,
All right.
Brian?
Heck yeah. Do it.
All right. Area code 480. What's your name? What's your question?
Well, my name is Terry Wilcox, and my question is the use of fish oils to help balance those macronutrients and blood sugar.
So, I am not aware of any, and just because I'm not aware doesn't mean it's not true, but I haven't come across anything about fish oil directly balancing blood sugar, but not to say it doesn't have a ton of other health benefits as an anti-inflammatory, helping to maintain the health and integrity of our cell membranes. Of course, we need lots of DHA for brain health. There's quite a bit of health benefits for omega-3 fatty acids in fish oil. Brandy, is there something I'm unaware of about fish oil and blood sugar?
So I have seen, and I can't recall them off the top of my head, but I know that there are some studies and there has been some chatter where, if you are increasing your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, so, more omega-3s than omega-6, obviously that does lower inflammation, which if you're also working on your diet, can have a good impact on insulin sensitivity, which then equates to better blood sugar balance. So I would say, if you are getting a good quality fish oil, or even taking in, good quality fatty fishes that you're getting the omega-3 from, it's not going to harm you. It's definitely going to have a positive impact, especially in combination with, a good diet, and working on all the other aspects of stress.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thanks, Terry. Great
that kind of gets to, if we kind of step back to and look at the broader picture, this gets into the reason why FDNs work non-specifically, right? If we work in a non-specific manner to help to balance out and to manage inflammation, blood sugar regulation, oxidative stress, the effects of high or low cortisol, everything impacts everything, and everything in the body is interconnected. And this is something that, Brandon and I talk about quite a bit on the Friday calls is, how, there's really no telling on how having an impact on lowering inflammation may have a positive impact, right? Kind of like the opposite of a domino effect. It's like an upward spiral, right? Of impacting other systems in the body. So it's not as though blood sugar or inflammation or oxidative stress, we use these terms and we even might imagine that they occur in isolation from each other, but all of these processes are happening simultaneously, and one issue causes another, right? That's kind of the reason why we look at everything as being connected to each other and working on all systems of the body at the same time. Yep. Yeah.
Thanks, Terry. That's a great question. Thanks for raising your hand.
Thank you.
All right. We have another hand raised, so let's try this one. Area code 818. You are on. What's your name? What's your question?
Hi, my name is Nina Tabak, and I was reading that the medical community sometimes does not treat Giardia. They believe that the body will take care of it on its own. So I was wondering, what is the FDN thinking on that? Because I think we treat it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Giardia, go ahead, Brandy.
I'll just go super quick and then I'll let you jump in, Ryan. I have not had a client with Giardia, but in working in the medical director program, I have seen quite a few of them come through. And my understanding is that's definitely one that you don't want to leave unaddressed because it can lead to some other symptoms. But Ryan, I'm sure you probably have some experience with clients with this. So what are your thoughts on Giardia?
So, yeah, I agree with that. To my understanding, Giardia is one of the nastier parasites, and from what I've encountered, there's less debate over whether that should be eradicated than some of the other protozoan parasites like Blastocystis hominis or Entamoeba coli or Cyclospora, some of these other ones that might show up on a GI map. Giardia does have a high association with like swimming in lakes and rivers and that sort of thing. It's usually where people get it. Like it's usually like kind of my more outdoorsy clients that show up with Giardia. And it does typically present with some pretty nasty symptoms like, chronic diarrhea and that sort of thing, or like vomiting or nausea. So it's something I've probably rarely, if ever, considered just leaving, letting it be. broader point too, because I get this question a lot, like whether certain parasites should be removed from the system. Because we also have to consider the larger scope or the functional impact that these parasites are having on the system. So for one, we know that parasites produce waste products, and that could feed into other microbes downstream, like bacteria, dysbiosis, candida, and yeast overgrowth. So it's not uncommon to see parasites show up on a stool test, and then you see a bunch of other infections or microbes showing up as well, right? So in that case, unless you get rid of the parasite, which is kind of the higher priority, it's further upstream. It's even larger on a molecular scale than bacteria or viruses or yeast. So that's another reason from a more holistic perspective to address the parasite. And another is that there's a lot of evidence that parasites can become reservoirs or like harbors for toxins in the body, like heavy metals and mold toxins, for example. So there's kind of a theory out there, too, that exists that the body might have a preference for keeping these parasites in the system as a way to protect our vital organs from these toxins. So it's kind of gross to think about that these parasites could be filled with heavy metals and other kinds of toxins. But I have seen a pretty high correlation with parasites showing up in someone who may have been had significant mold exposure, that may have mercury fillings in their teeth, may have high levels of mercury or aluminum or other heavy metals show up on an HTMA. So another kind of more comprehensive view of getting rid of parasites is also as a way to help detoxify the body, right? Like even if you could prove that the parasite was not pathogenic in any way and it was not causing any immune stimulating effects, you could still say that there's reason to get rid of parasites as a way to be able to help dump toxins out of the system. So that's kind of how I look at it too. I'm always kind of correlating with whether someone has a lot of toxicity, because I do see that correlation quite a bit with parasites and someone that has a higher degree of toxicity.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So if you kill off the parasite and bind the toxins and take it out of the body, is that it? Yeah. Or do you have to go back and add another protocol for the mold or the heavy metal or any of those other things?
Yeah, it depends on how comprehensively and deeply you're working with the client and the other labs you're running. So, those are other things you might consider looking at, like running an HTMA to look at macro mineral levels and to look at any heavy metals showing up. If you were to run an organic acid test, that's a really good initial assessment to see if there's mold colonization in the body. And in which case, yes, if you want to achieve like long-term sustainable results, you do need to address all of those hidden stressors eventually at some point. But if all you had was a GI map, you're going to go a long way with eradicating those parasites, and then onboarding like a binder like GI Detox into the protocol, which is a good broad spectrum binder that will help to mop up the die-off, but also bind to any toxins that are being dumped out of the parasites.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nina. Well, thanks, everybody who joined in. We are coming down to the last few moments here in the call. So thank you, Kirsten, Terry, and Nina, for asking your questions. Thank you, Ryan, for joining me. And I do want to remind everybody that you can re-listen to any of these shows on any of your favorite podcast player. You can even go on iTunes and look for the Functional Health Coaching Show. And if you'd like, you could also leave us a review. The reviews do help to spread this podcast or this call to the general public who maybe are looking for functional health coaches or want to learn more more about becoming a functional health coach. So if you'd like to do that, that's great. It's not necessary, but we would definitely appreciate it. Ryan, any closing thoughts before we tell everybody to have a great Friday?
That's about it. Just hope everyone has a great weekend, and just keep doing the good work and spreading the FDN word and helping as many people as you can.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. Brandon will be back, and he'll be hosting again with Ryan, so be sure to call in next week. Have a fantastic weekend, everyone.
Thanks, Brandy. Bye, guys.